Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Unslaved. We're so happy to be back with you, continuing this groundbreaking series. I have personally been thoroughly enjoying this. This is now part 8, the sacred food of the gods, getting deeper into this Dead Sea Scrolls deception research that is it's truly groundbreaking, Michael, what you've put together here, the writers, the authors, the collection of research you're bringing to the table. You're not going to find this. I've been looking into this for a while, and it's really interesting. I had a bit of a friendly debate with a Christian friend of mine, and they were the ones that brought up the Dead Sea Scrolls as some kind of validation for the literalist dogma. And I was like, whoa. So we had quite the conversation, and I was glad it was all fresh in my mind. And I pointed them to the series, and they actually going to check it out. So that's always a good thing. And we've been getting great feedback from our members as well. So excited for this 8th chapter.
Yeah, you're right about that. I think a lot of our viewers will be inspired from this because although it covers a lot of ground, there are gems in it, so that if you do have to confront a hardline sort of Christian type, you will know way more than they know. I always, I always emphasize that one shouldn't ever indulge in arguments with people who are dogmatic. They have armored themselves, but the point is also, should they pick on you in terms of, they try to come in and share their dogma, you will at least know, not me, mate. You better go look for some low-hanging fruit here because it's not for me. And what the series like this do is they arm you with a couple of quips like that. Actually, a lot more, but you'll know. Look, like we saw last week. How can this be anything like an endorsement? How can the Dead Sea Scrolls be an endorsement of Christianity when they're in the hands of a body that once started off as a modernist movement within the Catholic Church and then did an entire flip over? They become literally a branch of the Inquisition. Yeah, right. Don't cite to me Dead Sea Scrolls as being any kind of authority proving Christianity in a dogmatic way when the very organization in charge of it is already duplicitous to the core, right? They didn't even keep with the tenets of their founder, the Father Lagrange. That would have been totally different, you see. But these Father Scians and then these DeVos, they towed the party line and went along with popes, Pius the Ninth and the 10th, both of those, and Leo the 13th, right, to crush anyone who dissented. First, they thought they could use science, then they changed and realized it's not working. So that's what the Dead Sea Scrolls actually prove. So if any Christian who's stupid enough to try and cite the Dead Sea Scrolls as an authority supporting something in the Bible has got a screw loose. And that's what we tried to show last week. No, you can't do that. You'll have to, go ahead and try to use something else, but don't use that because the cover-ups and the deceptions were multiple there. And when confronted also on certain points, many points, these authorities that actually were in charge of the manuscripts wouldn't even write letters back. They wouldn't even engage. So how do you dialogue? How do you sit around and have debates with people who won't even, right? And these were top scholars. These were professional top scholars writing formal letters to the international team and getting no responses. And when the few times that they got a response, it was utterly imperious. Hands off. Who do you scum think you are? You weren't picked for our team, and we'll decide. We're the church. We'll decide what is science and what isn't. All of this nonsense. They just buried themselves deeper and deeper in controversy. So now it doesn't work. Can't be citing the Dead Sea Scrolls for anything. And then even the story of Qumran was covered up. As I said before, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, the church did not admit that they came from a community in Qumran. Deception number one. They lied and said it came from some local churches, in the precincts of Jerusalem. So a total lie. They didn't even want you to know about the community in which the documents were discovered. And on we could go. And Professor Eisenman is finding over 200 other caves not far away. Talking about probably the Qumran wasn't even a unique settlement. There could have been dozens more, all related. So I've shown in this series that everything that we know about those, late Judaism, early Christianity is bogus. And especially when it comes to the identity of Jesus. No crucified Savior before them. No martyred teachers. Wrong. They go way back. And they were fresh in the memory of the Jews. I told you there was ones in 4 BC. There was ones after that, right? It was a very common thing. In fact, it was one of the marks. The man of sorrowful birth. The one who's a wounded healer, a wounded teacher, who will come amongst us with great wisdom. All of this. This runs throughout all of esoteric Judaism and was picked up by these Christians. So we saw systematically last week that you can chip away at all of the things that supposedly speak of the uniqueness of Jesus. We had a whole list, and that's not even citing the other contradictions in the Gospels. Or why do the Gospels mention such and such, but the book of Acts, allegedly by Luke, or the epistles by Paul, don't mention the same things. They can't get the details of the resurrection correct. They can't get the Passover location, timing correct. And on go the contradictions. Here's a man who says, obey, not even a single stroke of the law can be Jesus. He says, I'm here to fulfill the law. That's a statement to pacify Jews. Oh, he's not lax on the law. Hey, he's coming to say, and not one stroke of the law, not one letter of the law can be violated. But 5 minutes later, he's telling, and doesn't the law say, honor thy father and mother? Thou shalt not kill? The same man who says that I'm here to fulfill the law is then telling you, bring them before me, and I'm here. I'm here to divide. I'm here to divide fathers and sons and mothers and daughters. That's honoring your mother and father now? Yeah, the contradictions go on and on. And we can't trust those guys. So that this underground stream that later it will be picked up by esoteric thinkers. There are many. I mean, we even had a picture recently of Leonardo da Vinci. Right? He's heretical in his paintings if you know how to decode them. And you look, I mean, even the famous Last Supper, right? Who's the disciple? This became more famous during the Dead Sea. What do you call it? The Da Vinci Code number, right? Is John Mary? Is Mary John? Sangreal? Could that be a mistake? Could it mean holy blood? In terms of a lineage, right? Not the Holy Grail, but Sangreal. It can be. It might have been a misprint, and it's a royal bloodline. But wait a minute, if it's a royal bloodline, but we find out when we track that Jesus didn't die on the cross, and this might have been known to Prior of Sion, might have been known to Knights Templar and other esoteric orders that I just spoke about, and known to people like Leonardo da Vinci. Well, that takes away a lot of the divinity of Jesus that the bloody Christians are all believing in, and not only believing in, but believing that this man died for your sins. He didn't die at all in the way that's proclaimed. Oh, what do you do with that? You see, on and on you could go. We've just touched on certain things. No, this deeply compromises Orthodox Christianity. It has nothing to do with belief in God. That's all separate. We're talking about the origins and foundations of this preposterous, insane, religion. But this should not impact anyone's personal, belief. In fact, it should impact it. It should say that, oh, now that I can sweep that away, the room is clear, philosophically speaking, for the wind to come in, for the, a feeling of airiness, where I can now put my mind onto spiritual matters without the clutter of what these black robes have brought me. Okay, so this is actually holy work, what we're doing right now. And I've said that since the beginning. This is the spiritual work. Once you get rid of the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. By the painstaking elimination of the false, the true is left standing. Why are these simple formula never used? Well, again, because we've been trained by these black robes. Have faith in my faith, pal. That's basically all it's about. Oh yeah, you're free to submit. No, not a deal I want to stand on for. Sorry, mate. I will go in search of the truth, on my own then, because I damn well know you don't have it. You just put your foot in the snare. You've just achieved the opposite of what you thought was going to come down. And so by the end of each of these programs, if somebody really contemplates each of the messages, you'll soon find out that what it's doing, it's untangling you from the webs that these, black robes, and these are ultimately Gnostics. These are ultimately very degenerate people. But the trouble is they have so much power and wealth. They've altered the history of our world. They've turned the orbit of this planet. They've changed the very trajectory of the human race, and it needs to be meticulously exposed bit by bit by bit and patiently. Today's program will be in 2 parts, though. There's so much to get into that we'll have to do a follow-up next week, and I'll even reserve some of my remarks for the end of next week. But yeah, just to let people know that this program 8 and then 9 will be linked in that way.
Oh, I can't wait. Wow. That really resonates, because for me personally, because of my background growing up in Christianity and talking to these people in my life. And the only time I entertain any debates is for my own personal curiosity and research. And I never start the fights. I just try to finish them. And when you're talking about how, when you clear away the clutter of the dogma that's been brought by these priesthoods, and you could look at all the religions are guilty of this. You now have a more direct connection with that spiritual spirit, with God, that, for however people want to look at that. You take the window dressing away, as you've said, the costumes, that element, and now you're actually right on that path. And that's why those other writers like Schwaller de Lubitsch, Gerald Massey, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, yourself, these other, Tony Bushby, Ralph, like these people that are there to say, look, there's a whole other story that needs to be told about this. And it's not what you've been taught in your Sunday schools and in your churches. And the one thing that I was thinking of as you were talking was that there's a big confusion when it comes to the character of Jesus in Christianity, because we're clearly talking about we got historical Jesuses or figures, right, that are being put together with this mythical Christ solar hero. That's the 16 crucified saviors before Jesus kind of thing. That's the astrotheology, where it's a tribute to the solar archetype. So that's overlaid on top of historical thing. And we do it in movies. I use this as a reference all the time. We do it in all these movies where you have films that go through eras. I've used the James Bond franchise as an example. You had the Sean Connery James Bond, and you got the Daniel Craig James Bond and the Pierce Brosnan James Bond. They're playing the mythical hero character of this spy that's loosely based on somebody that maybe lived, Ian Fleming, but is so embellished and is kind of like an archetypal character. And if you watch the ones in the 70s and 80s, their enemies are going to be aligned. They're going to be written in as what America was facing at the time, or what Britain was facing at the time, and what was going on in that historical period. So there's historical anecdotes woven into the story. But obviously that doesn't mean James Bond existed in the 70s and also in 2014 and also in 20. Like, it's a character that's going to have the historical aspects of the day woven in with the mythical character. That's really the point of the entire story. And when I ask any Christians, and I often talk about this with my brother who's a Christian, I always get to that point where I'm like, well, I'm just a slightly different variation here. I'm just looking at it as a metaphor, and you're just looking at it literally. So what's the difference when it comes to accessing spiritual wisdom? Like, why do you need it to be a guy with a face and a Facebook page and a historic, like, why does it need to be that for you? As opposed to realizing that, oh, it's actually a metaphor for my own spiritual awakening process. Like, what's the difference? And they never have an answer. And I